So one thing that I'll show you before we really go into any of the math questions, if we go back to this RELINC book and we look at the composition, the real estate commission has separated it out. Real estate mathematics is 8 questions on the national. There is no math on the state licensing exam anymore. Still is the hardest exam to pass, but understand that if you don't get a single math question right, you could still pass the state licensing exam. 8 questions is it. If you go back to this syllabus that I shared with you, math is separated out into its own category. In other words, we're going to tell you what kind of math you may see. Now, just because of the formulas, understand that you may see one type and not another. You may see all the types. It's just saying if it's on the syllabus, it can be on the test. Real estate mathematics, it has its own section, but we didn't teach it that way. We taught it throughout the course in different places. So what kind of math can be on the test? Brokerage commission calculations, estimating net to seller after brokerage fee and after closing expenses, including what sales price would we need to sell for to net a certain price to the seller, profit and loss on the sale of real estate, including percentages, equity, including percentages, area and related calculations, conversion of acreage to square footage and vice versa, right? 43,560, that magic number that we need for old ladies driving 35 and a 60, square footage of variously shaped buildings and parcels of land, rectangles, triangles, bay windows, all that stuff. Square yards. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time a lot of times in class to talk about square yardage. It's tricky because of the way it works, right? A yard is 3 feet. Most people's brains want to explode. Cost or price per square foot, acre, front foot. Here's those ad valorem property taxes, excise tax on property transfers, finance calculations, simple interest, monthly principal and interest payment, mortgage debt reduction, loan origination fees and discount points, loan value, basic buyer qualification. It seems like a lot, but understand you may not see some of these, you may see others. Settlement statements, valuation. It seems like a lot, but it's really a pretty condensed list. It's just the style of question could be pretty vast. So if we're looking from a mathematical point of view, I have to give you a disclaimer. I teach math a little bit differently than probably some of the other instructors. I like to teach what I call common sense math. I am not in love with formulas and I am not in love with T-bars. Why? They're an extra thing to memorize. And if you don't memorize it, you're screwed. But if you learn common sense math and you just take it slowly, you can find the answer to just about any question, even without a formula. When we're dealing with a tax bill question, right? What is the annual tax bill for a property assessed at $130,000? And a tax rate of 75 cents per 100 of assessed value? There are a lot of different terminologies we use in any given question. And you have to always pick the right information because the test loves to give you too much information to trick you. And so there is a huge difference between assessed value, purchase price, and loan amount. So when we're dealing with taxes, we're always dealing with assessed value for the per 100 and the mill rates. And then sometimes we're also dealing with what we call an equalization factor. So North Carolina, we always use assessed value. Some states use an equalization factor where they'll say, we're charging you X amount percentage of a purchase price or a market value. So if you see an equalization factor, you've got to convert that number before you start the math. And I think there's an example right here. So this would be an equalization factor. A house with a market value of $50,000 is located in a city where the assessed value is 60% of market value. So notice how they gave you some extra information. Here's the market value, and your assessed value is going to be 60% of that. So you're still finding the assessed value and then doing the math. So be very careful. We call this an equalization factor. But if we're just talking about doing the basic math, when we're dealing with these rates, let me tell you what to be thinking so you don't even need a formula. If we say 75 cents per 100, that's all that's saying. 0.75 is 75 cents per 100. In other words, if this is your tax rate, you owe us 75 cents per $100 of assessed value. Let me pull my calculator here and show you how simple this is. I'm not talking formulas. I'm not talking anything else. If we are thinking about what I just said, 75 cents per 100, you can ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, well, how many times does 100 go into 130,000? 130,000 divided by 100, it goes into it 1,300 times. So now, in other words, you owe us 75 cents 1,300 times. 1,300 times 75 cents for a tax bill of $975. Now, let me take this one step further. It is easier, in my opinion, if you always convert things to a per dollar amount. If I put 100 on a calculator What would you have to do to 100 in order to convert it to a 1 on a calculator? We would just divide it by itself, wouldn't we? So 100 divided by 100 gives us 1. If this is a per 100 rate at 75 cents, all you would do is take 75 cents and divide it by 100. And now that is our per dollar rate. In other words, you owe us 0.0075 cents per dollar. If you were converted to a per dollar rate, just multiply that by your assessed value. So all I did was I converted the rate to a per dollar rate. So now I can just multiply by the assessed value to get my tax bill. You see how it's the exact same answer I just got. The reason why I recommend converting it to a per dollar rate is, folks, they're not always going to ask you the straightforward question. This one's very straightforward. It's, what's the tax bill? What if instead I said the tax bill is $975 at a rate of 75 cents per 100? What was the assessed value? And you don't have this. Well, this is where T-bars come in. If you were taught T-bars by your instructor, great. T-bars are just a visual representation of when to multiply and when to divide. So if we are looking for this and 0.75 per 100, and we have the tax bill of $975, that's telling us that we would divide by the rate. If we've always convert the rate to a per dollar rate, the math is beautiful. $975 divided by 0.0075 takes us right back to where we were. So I highly advise you to always convert to a per dollar rate, because then it works beautifully forwards and backwards. Now, for those of you who don't like T-bars, I don't like them. I like linear equations. If we're dealing with a linear equation, you can just as easily do the same thing. I need to know what the assessed value was times 0.0075 that I already converted equals my tax bill of $975. I'm going to say a word that's kind of scary to some of you, but it shouldn't be. Algebra. Some of you just threw up in your mouth, right? But it's not that bad. All algebra is moving stuff around on an equation to figure out the value. So let me just get this down to one letter. I need to find V. So if I do something to one side, I have to do it to the other. In other words, if I divide by 0.0075 on this side, that negates it. And then I divide by 0.0075 on this side. So now it's the same as saying the value, the assessed value I'm looking for, equals 975 divided by 0.0075. Linear equations are so much easier because you're not having to memorize where to put stuff in a T-bar. You're just using basic math concepts. A whole times a percentage equals a piece, and then just move the stuff over to find the missing value. And that works for everything, just like the T-bars do, but without having to memorize formulas. Convert it to a per dollar amount. Now, let me show you one more technique for the math. If we're dealing with a per dollar amount, and I wanted to ask you, what is this as a mill rate? Remember, a mill rate is just this amount per 1,000. So if you look down here at this question, 8.9 mils, that's the same as saying you owe us $8.90 per 1,000. I can easily convert a per 100 rate to a mill rate. If I wanted to convert 100 and do something on a calculator to make it 1,000, what would I have to do to 100 to make it 1,000? 100 times 10 gives me 1,000. So this is a per 100 rate, and I wanted to make it a mill rate. All I take is my per 100 rate times 10. Now I've converted it to a mill rate. So now if I said, turn this number into a mill rate for me, it would be 7.5 mils. In other words, you owe us $7.50 per 1,000. If I wanted to convert this mill rate back to a per dollar rate, if I wanted to turn 1,000 into 1, I'd divide by 1,000. So divided by 1,000. Notice how it's a pint a pound the world around, as they say. It's so easy to convert it, and they may ask you, take it from a per 100 to a mill rate. Take it from a mill rate to a per dollar rate. If you convert it to a per dollar rate, it's so much simpler. So let me give you an example of number 3 right here, and then I'll do number 4 for you. Properties assessed at $64,410. County tax rate is 8.9 mils, meaning you owe us $8.90 per $1,000 worth of value. What would be the amount of the annual tax bill? And then what would be the monthly payment to the escrow? So this is a 2-part question. But yet again, easy peasy. If I take my mill rate and I divide it by 1,000, I've converted it to a per dollar rate. So now all I have to do is multiply it by the assessed value, $64,410. Bam, annual tax bill. So there's the answer to question, part 1 of the question. How much would we have to go into monthly escrow? Divided by 12, $47.77. If you convert it to a per dollar rate, it is so simple, because then it's just your per dollar rate times your assessed value to give you your tax bill. House with a market value of $50,000 is located in a city where the assessed value is 60%. So this is that equalization factor we were talking about. This just happens in some municipalities, and you may see this on your test. So we're not charging you taxes on $50,000. we're charging you taxes on 60% of $50,000. So $50,000 times 60% to give us your assessed value of $30,000. And that's the number you're using for the math. And we'll do everything else the same. Notice that it has some key words here. You always got to read the question carefully. Is located in a city. So you're always doing county. Only city if you're in the city limits. Well, in this case, for both. The county rate is $1.45 per 100, and the city rate is $2 per 100. So our rate is actually $3.45. Just add them together per 100. I like to just convert it to a per dollar rate. So $3.45 divided by 100 gives us a per dollar rate times our assessed value should be taxes of $10.35. If you do it the other way, you could also just say $30,000. How many times does 100 go into it? Divided by 100, and then multiply that by your per 100 rate times 3.45. Same answer. Doesn't matter which way you do it. I personally like to convert it to the per dollar rate and just always do that because when the question's backward, it makes life easier. But could you also say how many times does this go into the assessed value and then multiply it by your whatever rate?
If you like this video, feel free to share it with a friend. For more real estate education content, please subscribe to the channel. From all of us at Seacoast Real Estate Academy, thank you for watching.